This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by nope.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the nope and into hope.
Welcome to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our question this week is from a listener named Emery, and they ask, training camp is about to start and I'm super pumped. As a freshman, I know that there are a lot of changes coming as I begin college. My faith has always been important to me, but I'm not sure how to keep it a priority in this next chapter. Do you have any practical tips that I can bring into training camp and into college?
Ooh.
I know.
Oh, what a great question from a very wise
Teenager. It's awesome.
Collegiate athlete. Recognizing one that like a lot of change is going to be happening from high school to college, and two, you're in a new environment. I know for me, like I didn't move from schools when I was younger, so like I was with the same people in a small town from preschool to 12th grade. And you go to college and it's like, wow, this is the first time I'm actually like meeting new people as a whole. Like it's the first time I'm going into a place that I'm going into a classroom that I may not know anybody there. I'm entering onto a team in which I may not know anyone that's on the team. Coaches that you kind of know a bit, but you haven't been with them long term. Like you've gone through the recruiting process and all that. So there's a lot of changes happening, and the question of like, how do I make faith a priority in this chapter of life? Like that's phenomenal, because I think a lot of people aren't even thinking of that. They're just like, I'm just going to go and adapt and roll with it. And if this has to come off the plate, then it does.
Well, I think there's a reality that I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm sure that a big portion of people who have faith in high school, when they go to college, they're like, I don't necessarily need this anymore because I'm going to go try and find myself. And so they kind of waver because it's like it never has been theirs yet. It's only been like their household or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then they haven't really made it their own. So the fact that Emery is even saying like, no, this is my own, and I want to try and keep this as a priority is just awesome, because I feel like for most people going high school to college that it's almost like the opposite.
Wow. We're going to be able to make this a well-rounded podcast.
Yeah?
Because I, as you're saying that, I just realized that for me, when I went to college, like faith and Christianity were not on the forefront. Like,
Yeah.
not there. But in college, one of my friends who is a great friend and an athlete, like someone I like was able to easily bond with, like invited me to come to church with him. And for me, that's like being in college is what helped my faith get started. Not that it wasn't there, but it hadn't been cultivated or nurtured. It was just like, hey, I believe in something bigger. I don't know what that thing is. And that open invite and his ability to remain steadfast in his faith is what like helped bring me in. So I was just thinking like, wow, like Emery has that potential to be that guy that again isn't like going in and screaming in college like, come to church with me, like follow the faith with me, but through like gentle invitation of how like he can lead his teammates and friends and people looking for it in college. So like it's kind of two different viewpoints that are very similar. Of one of like, well, a lot of people like will go to church as a child because that's what their family upbringing is. Well, others like that's not the case, and then once they're in college, like then they start going. So there's like,
yeah, I'm almost the opposite,
Yeah.
right? Like I had faith growing up. I was raised in a family that went to church. But I felt like I made it my own in a way that my parents and my siblings necessarily didn't as much when I was in high school. Like I was already very convicted in like middle school about a lot of faith teaching, and it already kind of felt like my own. By the time I got to college, not that I was like the type, not that I was the example that you're saying of like, come to church with me and like screaming that from the rooftops, but I intentionally, like anytime we had like a presentation that we had to do, I intentionally chose things that were like in line with my faith
Mm.
to be and set an example. Like I remember one time in like argument and debate, I chose to debate why you should save sex until you're married. And in front of like an entire public like state school like in my class because it was something that I was convicted about and I believed whether you had faith or not that that should be the case. And I just remember my one friend who was living the exact opposite life that I was, like thought it was like so
Yeah.
hilarious. But like that was my intention. My intention was to be an example and show people a different perspective that like they really weren't getting like anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I'm almost the opposite of you. Like I came in like with it. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, so Emery, we will give practical tips
Yes.
and they'll come from two different perspectives that are geared towards the same thing, which can be really cool because you can relate to one side and see the other
Yeah.
side of this as well. I'm just thinking when you gave that debate at the time with the knowledge that I had, I probably would have been booing you
In the
in the
background.
back.
Yeah.
But
I
now
mean,
I'd be like, yeah,
a lot of the faces were just like, "Who is this psycho?" Hey, but I got an A on the presentation, so booyah.
there we go. So I think Emery, practical tip that I would start with is one like you asked, uh how do I keep this as a priority in this new chapter? We make time for what is a priority.
Mhm.
And the way that we do that is by pre-deciding that it is a priority and then setting up a structure that allows that to be practiced. If we have a value that we want to follow and we don't follow it, we're not being congruent. If we're not being congruent, then our spirit's not being filled. And if our spirit's not being filled, we're only going to perform up to 66% of our capabilities. Why? Because spirit, mind, and body. If you're only doing mind and body, that's two-thirds of the equation. So you have to pre-decide which you are, that this is going to be priority. But now you have to look at your class schedule, you have to look at your training schedule and say, what does this look like for me to practice this while I'm there? What, if you're Catholic, what masses are you going to? If you're Protestant, what sermons are you going to? What are the resources available on campus that you can fit into your schedule? Um, Teammates, is there anyone on your team? Like, are you pre-deciding that, like, hey, it's scary as a freshman, but I'm going to go in and see, like, hey, is there a Bible study that is already established? And if not, then maybe I'll establish one. And I won't steal this story. I'll let Brandy share it with one of a basketball athlete that she worked with that really brought faith to his college basketball team and kind of how it's led to
Yeah, I
that.
mean that exact example. He went in and it was a Catholic college, a D1 Catholic college, but he went in and there wasn't a Bible study. There weren't these different things, but he knew it was a priority for him and he knew it was a priority for his team.
Mhm.
Again, it's 33% of the equation and I think he knew that they needed that more. So he started a Bible study as a freshman for his team and I think like just because you're a freshman going in doesn't mean that you can't boldly lead.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, just pre-deciding and looking at like what does the practice of your faith look like while you're in this new environment? Because there's a lot of change coming your way, and if you have these things pre-decided, then these things will work around what you have going on. Um, Also pre-deciding like, hey, you know what? Like our team might have get-togethers, there might be parties happening Saturday night, and I'm gonna go to those but I'm not going to miss service on Sunday or Saturday night or talking to the team chaplain. Like I'm not going to miss these things regardless of what's going on. So that's the first thing, and those I think are like bigger practical tips of like the pre-deciding. The kind of smaller practical tips are similar to that and like decide in what your values are and what those actions will be to those values. But the small things are so underestimated of how powerful it can be. It can be as simple as like every time before I step foot onto the practice field, I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna make the sign of the cross. I'm gonna write a verse on my tape, on my wrist tape if it's football. I'm just kind of assuming football, but it may not be football,
mhm.
but it can be on your eye black. It can be these little things like teammates struggling and you just go to your teammate and you just say, hey, like I know that you're struggling. I just want to ask, like, can I pray for you?
Mm.
Like people forget how powerful that. I remember the first time that a person sat down with me and said, "Hey, I know you got a lot of stuff going on. Can I pray for you?" And I'm like, "What? Yeah, like go ahead." And he was like, "Okay, go ahead and bow your head." And it was in the middle of a coffee shop. And like he's just hand over me, just praying like out loud. I'm in the back of my chair looking around like, dude, like what are you doing, man? Like people are looking at us. But to this day, like that was one of the more powerful prayers that I'd receive, even though I was a little like, I don't want to say hesitant, but I was like a little weirded out
Hmm.
of like, hey, shouldn't we do this like not where everyone can see us?
Hmm.
But he was so bold in his faith that he was like, let him see it.
Yeah.
Let him see that this is the solution. And that like that moment really changed it for me. Like that got me even more curious of like, dang, how can you be so bold? And it's because he knew who he is, and he knows who he is because he knows who made him.
Yeah.
And he's like confident in that, and that like that moment stuck out to me. So don't be afraid to say like this is how I'm going to practice my faith in simple ways, and don't underestimate how much that is going to influence other people around you.
Mhm. I think too, you stole like all the ones that I wanted to say. And
Oof.
so like I love that we're on the same page. And I just want to add another thing because I think that this was one of the most transformative and influential things that I did when I was around your age, Emery. And it was being intentional with the music that I was listening to.
Mm,
Because, like, I was like the Catholic girl going to youth group, and like I was leading ministries in high school and in college, and like all these things. But I was listening to kind of vulgar music. It was like my one thing. Like, I didn't drink, I didn't party, I didn't swear, but like I was gonna listen to this vulgar music because it was like my one thing, and really getting to this moment of there's really good music out there that doesn't need to be vulgar. Now, I know if you're in a locker room, if you're at practice, like there's going to be music that like kind of bonds you
hmm
with the other teammates that you have and stuff like that. And I know that that's part of it. But I think in your own time, asking yourself, like, what music can you listen to that sets you apart? When I was in high school, there were Christian rappers, Lecrae, Andy Mineo, and a couple others who were really big on, it was almost like this movement. I don't remember exactly like how they phrased it, but it was like 116, which is like I am not ashamed of the gospel. And so they were very big, like their a lot of their songs had the lyrics and shouting out to like the 116 and like the kind of posse of Christian
Yeah.
rappers that were around that. And that was like when I was in high school, but it's still happening today. And I think for you and for others listening, don't be ashamed of the gospel. Don't be ashamed of being a Christian in any environment. And the fact that you're asking this question already shows your spiritual maturity, but you know, taking a step back and asking yourself, like, what are you listening to? There's a lot of fun music out there, whether it's Christian rap or someone like Forrest Frank, who's Christian but like still upbeat, or even music that may not be Christian in the sense of like talking directly about God, but it doesn't have the explicits. We have our explicits off on Spotify. So
hmm
if we hear a song or like say someone's like, hey, listen to this song and it's explicit, like we can't listen to it because we already have it turned off. So maybe consider turning it off on your Spotify. Just little things like that, I think, can go a long way. And God speaks to us very clearly in what we see and what we hear. And if you're constantly filling your brain with music that is vulgar, even if you're doing other things that may not be as great, like there's still like an incongruency that is going on, or there's a temptation there um of the world. And so I don't know. I think music is like a huge thing that it's a vice that I think a lot of people stay on, even in the
hmm
Christian space. But there's really great music out there, so don't miss it because you're nervous about being different than the rest of your team.
Yeah, and you just nailed into like this trickle effect of thoughts that I had of like the being different and like being specifically in faith as a Christian. St. Paul teaches us that like we're not to conform to the pattern of this world. right? And we're supposed to be different. And that means you as an athlete, like holding these Christian values, are like you get to be different than the other athletes that are there. And there's a lot of cool ways in which you can do that. I mean, that's how Tim Tebow got the trust of his teammates. Like they got done with a grueling workout, and then the coaches were like, get in the cold tub. And the team was like, oh gosh, no, no, no. Tim Tebow as a freshman hopped in. Like, I can suffer. I can
Mm-hmm.
go through pain. I can pray my way through this. Like I got this. And then everyone was like, who's this crazy white boy? And like started to follow him because of his ability to be different, because of knowing who he is and being grounded in his faith, right? It's looking at like, I'm so, I don't want to say, I guess fatigued of seeing athletes like throwing their helmets
Yeah.
or like throwing water coolers or throwing their glove or their bat or whatever it may be. And I get it, like being involved in a competitive sport and putting your all into it, like there are moments that there are emotional outbursts.
I mean, come on, you were on a team that a guy kicked you yelled at the ref and the guy kicked a
A
basketball
basketball
across the
across the,
court.
and like this stuff happens. And I think a good example is like the Ohio State, I think it was a running back who in the college football playoffs got in an altercation with the other team and kind of lost his cool for a little bit. And then afterwards, they're like, what happened there? And he's like, I lost my cool. I immediately went over to the sidelines and I prayed and asked God for forgiveness.
Mm.
Like right there,
Yeah, boy.
like, like different. And
Yeah.
like, I lost my cool and I didn't want to, but I did. It was a very heated moment, but I knew where I had to go afterwards to keep my composure.
Mhm.
You know, cleaning up your equipment, like staying disciplined with the small things, like even without your teammates seeing you pray, writing down verses, just by the way that you behave and when you face adversity, lets them know that there's something different about you. And then they
Mhm.
start asking the questions like, what is it that you have that I don't have
Mhm.
that you can handle the situation and keep your cool in it? And the last thing I want to say is that I think we're in this really cool shift right now in which a lot of professional athletes are making it cool to be faithful.
Yeah.
Like
It's awesome.
they win the Stanley Cup, they win the finals, they win the Super Bowl. They get put on the cover of Madden, Saquon Barkley, and then they're asked, "Oh man, are you worried about the Madden curse?" And he goes, "I don't believe in curses. I believe in God."
Drops the mic.
Like this running back that like all the youth look up to. This guy backwards hurdled a defender and is on the Madden cover and said, "I don't care about a curse. I care. I believe about God."
Hmm.
Like wow, like they're making it cool to follow in the faith. I think there's less of a like barrier to maintain it. Even like the New York Jets, they've like installed Bible study into their training camp,
Hmm.
and like teams are realizing just the power and the gift that this is. So, and that's not true in every environment, but I just think as a whole, that a lot of teams are looking at this as like, yeah, why don't we practice this?
Hmm.
Why are we not engaging in faith, whether Christian, whether Muslim? Like, why are we not celebrating
Yeah.
these things? Because this is what keeps spirits full. And if spirits are full, the athlete's going to perform better.
Mhm.
So it makes sense from a performance equation that this stuff is included in
Yeah.
there.
I just want to speak truth to the younger people listening. If you're older and you know someone in high school or even in college that this episode could really serve, please send it to them. I just want to speak truth because I went through adversity in high school, don't get me wrong, but I do think that there is a level of challenges that you are going to face no matter what in your life, but you don't have to go down this rabbit hole of suffering, of going into the world and partying or falling into some deep, deep, deep sin in order to then have this redemption story of Jesus saving your life. Jesus saved your life right now. Like you don't have to go through the struggles. And I think a lot of people's stories are, hey, I graduated high school and then when I was in college, I kind of went off the deep end, but then I found my way back to Jesus. You don't have to go off the deep end to find your way to Jesus. Jesus is already here. And so I just kind of want to speak that truth that like you don't have to waver.
Yeah.
If you do waver, God is merciful and he's still there and he's still gonna rescue you, but you don't have to waver, and therefore, like going in with your values and with your convictions, into this great life of being an adult and what that looks like
Yeah.
for really the rest of your life, like is awesome. So enjoy it and you don't have to waver. Know what your convictions are, know what your values are, and most importantly, like know who God is and trust in that.
Yeah. I want a mic drop, but I want to add something. So mic drop, catch, boop.
But that's
But she did. So when I think of athlete, like biblically, like who comes to mind?
St. Paul.
St. Paul, right?
Hmm.
St. John's in there because he's faster
St. Peter.
than St. Peter, but like St. Paul, he has all these athletic references in there of winning the race and how to race and like all these different things. And I look at his writings and his stories, and I think the other thing that we get wrapped up in is that like, oh, like it's all about the suffering.
Hmm.
Like, no, it's about having joy in the suffering because you have a hold of what other people have not yet accessed. St. Paul was beaten, thrown in jail, earthquake happened, the cell doors open. He could have escaped. The prison guard was getting ready to kill himself because he thought that the prisoners had escaped. And instead, he said he was singing while being locked up and after being beaten, was singing, the doors open. The prison guard goes to kill himself, and St. Paul says, hey, 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 no, no, you don't have to do that. We're right here. We're sitting in an open cell that we could escape from, but we decided not to. Why? Because we have joy in the suffering. We know that there's a greater plan in this, that I'm going through this adversity for good reasons, and God's got my back. And here's the kicker. At the end of this whole thing, he could have gotten out of all of it in the beginning. Like first time that he got whooped, he could have said, I'm a Roman citizen, I have a right to a trial. And instead he didn't.
Hmm.
He got beat, thrown in jail, and then like all this adversity, and then told them that he was a Roman citizen. Like, wow, it's not about the suffering. It's about knowing that suffering is going to happen. College athlete, you're going to have practices that you are suffering through. There's going to be
Oof.
games that you are suffering through. There's going to be classes that you're suffering through. There's going to be time in the morning in your bed at 5 a.m. that you're suffering because you do not want to get up and go to practice because your body is freaking sore and you
Hmm.
don't think there's anything left. And in that, you're going to be able to be joyful. And other people are not because of what you have accessed that they can also access. So, like drop, pick
Mic
up.
drop and mic drop again. Hope stories?
Hope story. Emery, thank you for that question. We hope that the tips were practical or you're able to pull the practicality out of it. Pre-decide, focus on the small things, make sure your actions are aligned with your values and just, you know, never underestimate how the small things can have a major influence
Hmm.
on the people around you.
Hmm.
Environment shapes the environment's invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Don't forget that we have the ability to shape the environment by how we behave and how we interact and set up our environments.
Hmm.
Hope story time. Why don't you kick us
Oh,
off?
I was gonna have you kick us off. Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors, you go.
Okay. Um, my hope story, I can't remember if we mentioned this in a previous podcast, but I just kind of want to share it again if we have. Have we talked about the devotional?
I don't think we have.
Okay, well, we wrote a 40-day devotional, and Emery, I think that this could also serve you if you are looking for something to read consistently. There are so many great devotionals out there if you want a physical devotional, even going to like Barnes Noble, things like that. Like there's 365-day devotionals that you can read. Ours is online and it's only 40 days, but it's really focused at athletes and athletes who may be discouraged or injured or going again through suffering or trials or things like that. And they just really need to ground themselves back in who they are because of who God says they are, who God is, and then building up the empowerment to make a comeback essentially. And so it's really set back to comeback and it's titled Built for a Comeback. And so the reason it's my hope story is one, I've gotten to write a little bit, through our social media and things like that, through our blog. But this is like my first kind of baby project is
Yeah.
like writing this 40-day devotional. And it's really close to my heart because I really got to pray with the scripture and pray with the language that is said. And it's a free resource for our listeners and for anybody. And so it's in the show notes. And I just wanted to share about that because I think
Hmm.
I'm really excited about it just from like my point of view, but I think it can really serve Christian athletes that are wanting to have something guide them.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's very well done. Like
Oh, thank
it's
you.
just like the aesthetics of it and then the meat and potatoes of it, it's all there.
Mhm.
And the nice thing is it, like Brandon said, it guides you through it. Like you might have your prayer style or you like read scripture, but maybe you haven't reflected on it, or maybe you don't know like what is the scripture that I turn to when I face a setback? What's the scripture I turn to when I just need to feel empowered? Like this does it for you and gives you the options that like you do the 40 days, like maybe every scripture sticks out to you, or maybe there's one that sticks to you in that season that you're in, and you can just continuously go back to it. So it's
Mhm.
very well done. Very, very nice job.
Thanks.
My hope story, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yes.
The 40-day devotional, we'll make a mental note and then a physical note after to include that. My hope story is kind of in line with what Emery was asking. And what's cool is that Emery's not asking like, how do I bring the faith to my teammates? It's how do I keep my faith?
Mhm.
And what I found is that by keeping your faith, if when that's your intentionality of how it does spread to others, and what's been really cool for me is that like I've been able to have these conversations that athletes have brought up to me because they were just curious. Whether they knew that I am Christian or not, they just like had questions of curiosity of like, hey, I know that you said like when you're struggling with this, you go and pray. Like, what does that look like? Because like I'm struggling and these other things I don't want to invest in, but like prayer, I think that might be something I can do. Like, how do I do that? And just doing those little things, it's so cool to be able to give that to other people. So that's my hope story is just being able to have those conversations that
Mhm.
I didn't think there's barriers to it.
Mhm.
It's like classic like Jericho. Like there's these walls and you're like, well not in this environment we're gonna be able to have these conversations. Boom, walls down.
Mhm.
Like let's talk about it, let's be open. And it's like been really cool
I love that.
to see that.
Well, thank you for the question, Emery. We really appreciate it, and we love getting to talk about our faith. So, listeners, if you have other questions that might be similar to this or similar to faith or anything like that, you can obviously we talk about injuries in sports and life and all this stuff and values and leadership as well. But if you have any other questions that have to do with faith, we'd love to hear those. You can go to our website, hopenotnope.org, and you can ask a question there. And we have the link in the show notes for asking questions as well.
Right. Have a great week and remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, but an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Note podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Note podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.